Hello, Church. This is not a normal Rector's video update. It's really exciting to have Claude Atcho joining on the call. Really been wanting you all to meet him and to hear about what God is doing in Charlottesville. And so this is an opportunity for you to meet him digitally via Zoom. One of the values that we love at Church of the Advent and that we share with our diocese is a value on mission, and in particular on planting new churches. And so all of the structures in our diocese, a lot of the money in our diocese is really routed in that direction. We want to be training leaders and sending out leaders to plant churches, responding to what God is doing as he puts visions for new churches on people's hearts. And so that's why we're excited to introduce you to Claude. His church is a project that people have been praying about for over a decade, if not way longer. I specifically know for at least the last 10 years, many people have been praying for it. And so we're really excited to hear about what God is doing. Our church is excited to be supporting this through prayer, supporting it financially, supporting it in all the ways that we can. So really want you all to know about this so that you can support it, so that you can pray for it, so that you can pray for Claude and his family. And so that's why we're doing this call. So Claude, glad to have you on the call.
Good to be with you, Tommy. Yeah, absolutely.
I'd love for people just to kind of hear a little bit about your, kind of background, where you're from, your family. I've had a chance to meet your wife, but I know you have some kids, so would love to hear about them.
Absolutely. Yeah. So my wife's named Kelsey. We're both from Washington State originally, but we have been in doing church planting work in Boston, and also did pastoral work in Memphis, Tennessee, and now we're in Charlottesville. And that's our long-term plan, is to be here and be a part of that work. So from West Coast, we bounced around a little bit. We have three kids: Julian, who's 10, Adrian, who is 8, and then Tatum, our daughter, who is 3. She was people say she's named after Jason Tatum from the Boston Celtics, because we were in Boston. I said that was not intentional, but if people like that, then that's fine.
What's it been like, that kind of shift from West Coast to East Coast? Different vibe here, different feel?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think with our experience in Boston and then our ministry experience in Memphis, and then now being in Charlottesville, it really does feel sort of like a smash up of those places. So Charlottesville does have that sort of definitely that East Coast university sensibility, obviously with UVA, but it does have these remnants of sort of Southern culture that we saw in Memphis. And so it feels like, though we didn't plan it this way, those two previous stops kind of helped prepare us maybe a little bit for kind of the quirky mix that is Charlottesville. So it's felt it's felt something we kind of wrap our heads around a little bit.
Yeah, that's great. Well, I know that you're speaking. You're in Boston, then you're in Memphis. I know that you weren't Anglican all of that time. Like me and many other people in our diocese, I know you didn't grow up in the Anglican tradition. I didn't really discover it until post seminary. So and so I know that you have a somewhat similar story. So how did you what was your journey into the Anglican spiritual tradition?
It started for me, I think really it started with the prayer book, actually. So when we moved from Boston to Memphis, I started using the Book of Common Prayer, and I found that really helpful for me. I think I was at a spot where I was kind of like hitting a little bit of a wall in terms of my own kind of like prayer life. I just felt like I'm saying the same thing, and this, like I don't know, it was just I felt dry, I guess maybe is the way to put it. And so the prayer book was a huge help for me, and give me language, give me sort of a depth and tracks to run on. And so, that was encouraging. And then I just started flipping through more of it. And it's like, oh, there's a family thing. There's this, there's that, and I just started trying to use that with my family, using it at home. Found that, again, edifying, found that helpful to just sort of have tracks to kind of run on and not sort of, just try to, engineer everything myself all the time. So that was a gift to me. And then at the same time, I started to think about denominations, and I had the sense that, I wanted to be a pastor for a long time. I was probably, I want to say, maybe 7 years into pastoral ministry at that point, in the sense that if I'm going to do this for a long time, I'm probably going to need a denominational home. I had known sort of the Baptist world and a non-denominational world. So I kind of just made this Word document of what I knew denominationally. And then I thought, I'm using this prayer book. Let me put this on there as a category too, although that'll probably never happen. But let me look into this as well. And moved in this direction. So I think, in short, really, the prayer book was a huge help. That was sort of the first doorway. And then I think just the sort of clear roots of historic Christian practice that comes through in our worship.
Mm,
That was another key thing for me, just the ability to feel a little bit more rooted and connected to what the church has always been and done. So that's kind of how I got moving in that direction. Although, obviously the story is, has more twists and turns. Those were kind of the key markers.
right, right. And so much of that resonates. I mean, I'm sure it'll resonate with a lot of our people. It definitely resonates with me, especially just that word rooted, just the idea, the feeling, the stability that comes from that sense of being rooted in traditions that are centuries upon centuries uh,
Yes.
old, sort of allowing the saints from previous generations to sort of inform and shape how we relate to God. Totally, totally resonate with that. Um, well, I'd love to hear about your, so you've had experience planning churches, you've had experience in a couple of different cities, and so you understand a lot, all of the challenges that are unique to church planting in urban environments. I've known many people that were a part of maybe one church plant, and then they said at some point along the way, "I'm never going to do this again."
Yeah.
And yet you've sort of, you've made this shift in tradition and denomination, and you've also, I mean, just from talking to you, I know you really feel a lot of excitement and a real heart and passion for to help plant this church in Charlottesville. So we'd love to hear about that and kind of your heart and what you hope to see happen.
Absolutely. Yeah. I was definitely one of those people that said, church planting, I'm probably, glad I did that. Our church in Boston still exists, which is a miracle of
Yeah.
God's grace and power. But I was like, I probably won't ever do that again. But what we heard, as you mentioned, that Charlottesville was something that people have been praying for quite some time. Excuse me. And so, coming into the work at Charlottesville, it felt like we were joining something that God was doing, and we were joining something that was going to happen, whether we came
Yeah.
to be a part of it or not. And to
Right.
me, that's sort of the ideal context for church planting, where it's like God is working and then you join in.
Mm,
And that's really what we've done. So we've really been kind of, riding that wave of God's, movement even before we were even here.
mm,
And so that's been really huge. I think our heart and vision for Charlottesville and our mission here, our church plan is called Church of the Resurrection, and our heart is really that sort of joy and life and power from knowing that Jesus is Lord and that Jesus is risen. To really see that take root in a community,
mm,
in our parish, and then sort of our witness to flow out of that. So the ways that we've spoken about this is that we want to be a gospel community rooted in the truth that Jesus is risen, and then marked by kind of three distinct things. The first being celebration, the second being invitation, the third being formation. And I think
mm,
it's really key that a big desire for us is to be firstly known for celebration. That is
mm,
praise and thanksgiving. That's actually, I think, most fundamental to the church, more so than mission, right? The church will exist into eternity, but the mission will cease. What
right.
will continue is joy, praise, and the worship of God and the enjoyment of Him forever. And so that's, I think, it's a really important to start that way, because that has a big impact on what a community, its DNA, and what it's like. And so I think if we were to start with mission, we become a community that's really focused on doing, on who we're reaching and how we're reaching them. And these are important things, but I don't
Mm,
think these are actually the first things about the church. And so the church is the church, even if we're maybe not reaching people as well as we want to. The church is the church, even if, maybe it's a Sunday where the numbers are low, right? All these sort of things. And I think it's a different orientation that's really rooted in the finished work of Jesus to establish the church. And then it's out of that joy that then we can invite people into our life together and into
mm,
knowing Christ, and then we
mm,
can form people. So I think really a liturgical, joyful, and Lord willing, over time, maybe an increasingly diverse in terms of
mhm.
intergenerational ethnicity and economics. That's really what we want to try to see happen here.
Yeah. Oh, that's fantastic. And I love what you say. I mean, I love all of that, but I love how your emphasis on joy and celebration as sort of being a central value and the kind of culture I can imagine the culture that arises out of that when you're naming that as a value
Mm,
would naturally flow into mission, that it would naturally flow into many of the other things that you're hoping to see happen. I'd love to, I mean, I know you guys are still kind of in the early stages. Where have you seen that celebration happening? Do you have any kind of experiences where you're beginning to see that value embodied?
yeah, so through the summer, we moved here in March
Mm,
2022. So we've been here about 8 months. So the first things that we did in the spring were really basically parties. So we did a St. Patrick's Day party. That was the first official thing that we did. And we just kind of kept that up through the summer. And that we've sort of just had that value of like, hey, let's get together around food,
Yeah.
around, drink, around meal. Let it be a good time for our kids. Like, let's just enjoy being with one another. So we kind of really set that tone early on. And then now as we kind of in this period of a soft launch, we've been meeting, Sunday mornings, the last 5 or 6 Sunday mornings. And so we'll do stuff of just like, hey, Charlottesville has great bagels, as you probably know, Bodo's Bagels. And so
Oh, yeah.
was like, we're bringing those in pretty much every week afterwards. It's just giving people the chance to like give thanks for gifts, big and small, and to be together.
Mm,
I think one of the things that we'll try to do as we get more established is actually to have more sort of pauses and moments to like give thanks for the things that God is doing in our community. And I think the other end of celebration is if we're attuned to the things where we're giving thanks for, we're also attuned to the things that hurt and are
yeah.
painful. So I think that joy and lament are on the same wavelength, right? If you're
Yeah.
alive to one, you're going to be alive to the other. And obviously, in UVA, we're recording this week. With the shootings that happened on campus, and so
Right.
we're holding holding room to pray in those ways, and in doing that for our folks and for our community. So I think those things are kind of weaved together, both joy
Mm.
and lament as well.
Yeah, it's so good and it's so easy. We've reflected on this recently. We had a service of lament, which was our first time ever doing that. But just in even thinking through that and planning it, just realizing, it's so easy just to focus on the joy and then the laughing with those who laugh and celebrating with those who
Yeah.
celebrate, but really not weeping with those who weep. And so I love how you see that on a continuum and how really the one needs the other. They sort of go hand
Mm,
in hand. Yeah, it's
yeah.
really beautiful. Um, well, I know that again, there's you're in the early stages and a lot yet to be worked out. Any particular things that I mean, one of the things that for those of you listening, I really want to encourage you to, however, wherever your list of things that you pray for is, however you
Mm,
structure your prayer life, put this community on the list. Church of the Resurrection in Charlottesville, Claude and the team, just make them a regular part of your prayer life. Are there things that we can be specifically praying for right now in this season, kind of the biggest challenges that you're facing or needs that you guys have?
Yeah, I really appreciate that. Yeah, I think I think the first thing that comes to mind for me is church planting is really frontier sort of work, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's true. That's true at Advent as well. I know y'all are more established, but it's still y'all are right on the front lines. So I think both in our case and in your case, I think prayers for protection and unity in the mission that we've been given, I think, are really critical. So
Amen.
I'd really love for people to pray that. Obviously for you all, but and then for us as well. So
Right.
that would be pretty huge. And then I think secondly for us is missional impact. We're sort of forming a life together as a community, and that takes time. But out of that, we do want to make that move into thinking more missionally, engaging more boldly in service and in mission to our community. So, and I know that we know that work needs to be preceded by a lot of prayer. So, prayer for missional impact and influence would be key. And then I think the third thing, maybe a more sort of immediately measurable thing, is space needs. Church plants are usually mobile. We just signed a lease for a really great space that'll run through the end of February. We'll talk with them in January about
Yep.
renewing it for longer. So that's a possibility. But there's also a possibility for some other spaces that we could move into in February that would also be really great for us. So just prayer for God's provision of our space as we build a life of worship together. So those three: unity, protection, missional impact, and space needs would be great.
Yeah, yeah, amen. Tell us if you have a minute. Tell us about the dance studio and how
Yeah, yeah,
and
absolutely.
how
Yeah,
that worked out.
yeah, yeah. No problem. Yeah, so we had a kind of windy road with spaces. So we had a really great lead with the Seventh Day Adventist Church in town, and it just ended up not working out at the end.
Yeah.
And great folks. It just didn't work out, unfortunately. And so we're kind of in this interim wilderness wandering period. And so we ended up renting this dance studio. I was at a coffee meeting and I looked in the back of the plaza and I saw it was a dance studio. And so I was with Fitz one of our other leaders, and we're
Yeah.
like, let's go check that out. Maybe we can rent that for next week. And so we did, and we rented it, and it was all these mirrors all over the place. So we covered most of them. It'd be weird to worship God while looking at yourself. That doesn't, this seems odd. Seems not liturgically correct. So we covered all these mirrors, and we're like, okay, everything is going great. And then all of a sudden, the wall on the left, we just hear the jazzercise music just starts pumping through. And then we realized that jazzercise was next door, and everyone started at 10:15. So it was like Elton John and all this stuff. And then, so it's like, okay, well, maybe this wasn't the best thing, but it turned into a great story. And they had a disco ball up top, and so now people in our church will show up in our new space and bring a disco ball and put it on a table in the back, and just to kind of remember those early days. So it was a good memory.
Oh man, I love it. I love it. Maybe that could become like a membership gift or something.
That's what we were thinking about. Yeah,
disco ball, little disco
t-shirts
ball.
or ring or something. Who knows? Yeah.
Well, hey, nothing says celebration like a disco ball. I mean,
that's true. It's true.
Yeah, that's awesome.
The kids really enjoyed it. Yeah, they were like, flip it on. So after service, we turned it on, and yeah, so it was good, man.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Well, I hope 20 years from now people are telling that story.
Me too, man. That would be wonderful.
Yes. Well, I know that there's so much more we could talk about, but I'm also aware of time, and my hope is, for some of you who remember, Claude's actually been to Advent. He preached at Advent, and hoping to see him back at Advent at some point, although he's got a lot on his plate right now. I also want to encourage all of you. There's a lot of overlap between DC and Charlottesville, people moving there, people moving here. Lots of us have friends there. So tell all your friends about Church of the Resurrection in Charlottesville. Anybody in the area, tell them that the church is starting. Encourage them to go and visit, to consider jumping in as God, as they feel led by the Lord to be a part of this. There's nothing like being a part of a church plant and coming in on the ground floor and seeing what God does. There's just absolutely nothing like it. It's an incredible faith building experience. And very few people actually have the opportunity to be a part of something like this. So really, really want to encourage you to do that. If you're based somewhere else like DC, when you visit Charlottesville next, go visit and worship with Church of the Resurrection. And as I said before, consider supporting them. Make sure you pray for them. And Claude, we're just so excited to have you in the diocese, and so excited for what God is doing. And we'll periodically plan to bring updates to our people, just so they can know how to pray and how to give thanks.
Man, that's a wonderful time. I appreciate it, and appreciate everyone at the church. And yeah, it was great to be with you all this summer, and hope to make it over again soon.
Absolutely. Well, thanks so much.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate it.
Bye-bye, everybody. Blessings.